not gonna.
We're a little delayed tonight because Adam was going to be here and had a conflict. So Harry is now taking over from what Adam was going to do. And so that is what's going on. Thank you, Harry. Yeah, thank you, Harry.
Thank you.
Okay, I need him. He starts it. He starts it. Harry, I need Harry.
You and me first. Hey, Harry.
Yeah.
Let's just start.
No, we are. I'm switching.
So it's not.
You have different values, Mike. I can't like. I'm very nonsense.
Good evening. Welcome to All Souls. Welcome to this great program this evening, and I want to first thank Sally McGee for bringing this to us and bringing Brian to us. And thank Brian for making the trip, and actually all of the wisdom he's already shared with Sally and me as we've planned this event. And we're going to begin by lighting our chalice. And Sally will light our chalice, and we are going to say the words on the screen together. With all our souls longing to be who we are, to be who we will become, to be ourselves. So we acknowledge the Nahantic, Mohegan, Mashantucket Pequot, and Eastern Pequot people as the traditional caretakers of the land on which we worship. We honor and pay respect to these tribes, their ancestors, and their lineage, who today uphold traditional practices, art, and education. Psychedelic medicines, as they've only recently been named, have been known and used with care and reverence by indigenous people for longer than history. For millennia, indigenous people worldwide have understood and revered plant medicines that provide insight and connection to God, the universe, and the greater power that connects us all. We give our respect and gratitude to the people and cultures who open doors to expansive ways of understanding the universe. We meet here today with appreciation and humility for the wisdom that ancestors, as well as today's indigenous people, hold. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Sally.
Okay. Everybody hear me? All right, great, thanks. Hello, friends. Thank you for coming tonight. My name is Sally McGee. I've been a member of All Souls since 2008. And is this on? On? Is it off? Off? On? Perry? Test, test. There we go. Okay. I want to welcome Reverend Brian Raychuk to All Souls. I learned about Brian this past summer through the Elm City Psychedelics Society. He was presenting down in New Haven about his dissertation on psychedelics. This is not working. Test, test. It's going on and off. Yeah. Thanks.
If I mute mine, does it mute yours? Okay. Because I've been...
We're gonna sit next to each. We're gonna sit
That
next to
sounds
each
good.
other.
Here we go. All right.
Okay. How's that? All right. Okay. Okay. There we go. Where were we? Brian. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So Brian. Hi.
Hi, Sally.
So this is the first I've met him in person. Was today. So Brian was presenting down in New Haven about his dissertation on spiritual experiences and psychedelics, which is a subject that's close to my heart. When I learned about his work, I asked Carolyn and Perry what they thought about inviting him here to All Souls, and true to form, they said yes. And I'm so glad, Brian, that you said yes too. I know I'm not alone in this room in that psychedelics have had a truly profound effect on my life. For more than 15 years, I was under a cloud of depression and anxiety. And for several years, antidepressant drugs kept that depression at bay. But eventually, they really didn't work anymore. My doctor had me try different drugs, but the depression was more than they could handle. I knew if I wanted to engage in the world that I needed something different. So I started learning about psychedelics, thinking the only way that I could do this for myself was through Western medicine, or through a Western medicine approach. I found a study at Harvard that was looking at the effects of psychedelic mushrooms on depression. So I got myself on the list for that study while they waited for FDA approval, which was required because these mushrooms are considered to be a Schedule I illegal drug. I was on the waiting list for 2 years. I called them every few months to check in, and finally they got approval to go ahead with the study. And I was so excited. I went through the participant survey, and one of the questions was, are you left-handed? And I am. I called them, confused by the question, and they said, if you're left-handed, you can't participate because MRIs are a part of the study, and your MRI will look different. and we won't be able to compare your MRI to the right-handed participants. So as quickly as it started, I was out of the study and back to square one. So I couldn't stand it anymore. I did more research, and eventually I found a psychedelic guide who I liked and I trusted. So long story short, with the support of my primary care doctor and therapist, I took a leap. And I was held in great care, and I prepared, and I took a big psychedelic mushroom trip, a journey, and it was a journey, and it has been life-changing. The journey itself was physically, mentally, emotionally, and spiritually challenging, and it was much, much more than words can convey, but I'll try just a little bit. During the journey, I felt the earth breathing and holding me like she is my mother. I encountered important guides in my life, including Reverend Carolyn and my own mother in the form of an oak tree, like the one that grew in the backyard of my childhood home. Eventually, during my journey, I fell completely off the planet over and over again and into the void. And when I did, I became nothing. Or really what happened was I became one with everything. And when the journey was over, I was speechless for a long time. And then the gratitude and love and tears just spilled out. My guide was there with me to support me in beginning to make sense of it. And a year and a half later now, I am still learning from that experience. The spiritual aspect of that original psychedelic journey and another journey this past summer is really hard to put into the words. A friend who knows how important All Souls is to me recently asked what my psychedelic experiences have done for my experience of my religion. And I told him they made it real. I fully experienced the divine, not as a fleeting connection, but as embodied reality. I can still feel it when I walk in the woods or close my eyes, or just think about that altered state of consciousness. I can reconnect and know that the divine relationship of everything is true, even if I can't see it right at this moment. So yes, the depression and the anxiety are gone, and it was not a magic pill at all. It's taken work to integrate the experience into my everyday life. And there's this spiritual connection, this even bigger thing that happened that I did not expect, and it's been an overwhelming gift. Brian, thank you for listening to that. I know you listened to a lot of people in your research for your dissertation, so that everyone can now kind of get a sense of you. I'm hoping that you can share just a bit about how you first came to your ministry.
Thank you, Sally. And thank you all for inviting me here. It's really exciting to be here with you and to share a bit about my dissertation and my passion for this, for psychedelic spirituality. And I guess I'll start with, I'm a Lutheran pastor in Avon, Connecticut, St. Matthew Lutheran Church. I have been there since 2019, and I grew up in Bethlehem, Connecticut, and then I went off to college at a Lutheran school in Indiana, Valparaiso University, then Luther Seminary. I was in Berkeley at the seminary there for a semester, Colorado, Minnesota for my senior year. Then my first call was in Pennsylvania, and while I was there, I started my PhD in pastoral counseling. Now, when I was a senior in undergrad, I wrote my senior thesis on the Native American church peyote ceremony. And I was blessed with the opportunity to attend a Native American church peyote ceremony. And that was in Ohio. And I can truly say it was the most spiritual experience of my life. It was very transformative and meaningful for me. Still 14, 15 years later, integrating that into my life. And that experience, among other experiences too, that sort of opened me up to it before and some after, but I really look to those experiences as very significant for me in my relationship with God, with myself, with others, with nature and the cosmos. So helping to, they helped me grow as a person and really feel that deeper connection and meaning. I think that I was already discerning going to seminary before the peyote ceremony, but it really helped solidify that. After the peyote ceremony, I became a vegetarian. I started daily meditation practice. So there was some real, concrete ways of integrating in my life. Centering prayer is my meditation practice. Maybe some of you have heard of that with Thomas Keating. And so that's been a very big part of my life. And I really do see that as coming out of that peyote ceremony experience too, as like a way of integrating. So when it came time to do my dissertation, or even before, really, when I was looking into PhD programs, I connected with some psychedelic researchers at Johns Hopkins and a number of people just to wonder together about how would I, as a soon-to-be seminary graduate and soon-to-be pastor, do some kind of psychedelic research in psychedelic spirituality. So discerned that pastoral counseling might be the best way to go for me. And so then when it came time to do my dissertation, I knew that I wanted to do something with something with psychedelic spirituality in some way. And so what I ended up doing was interviewing professional mental health clinicians who themselves had had spiritually significant psychedelic experiences. And so the past research has demonstrated that the more mystical or spiritual a psychedelic therapy session is, the greater the healing outcomes are. So it's a really fascinating finding. And what I did was a qualitative study of interviewing people who had had these experiences and kind of categorizing the different, all the different interviews. There were 17 interviews, and then I compiled that into my dissertation, and that's some of the quotes you saw earlier, and we'll share a little later, are from that study. So, and I finished, there it is. And that was 2 years ago now that I did my final defense, and that's kind of what this presentation is kind of sprung out of. So,
Thanks. So we can kind of, okay, we'll give that a try. All right.
is it green?
It's green. Okay. right. So I was talking about what some people call magic mushrooms, but they're certain genus of mushrooms, psilocybe mushrooms. What substances were you talking about in your research that are psychedelics? It's much broader than just that. So what are some of the other kinds of substances that you were talking about and looking at in your research?
Yes, so good question. So there's a number of psychedelic substances, and there's some that are considered the classic hallucinogens, which specifically affect the, if I can get this right, the 5-HT2A receptor, serotonin receptor, and these are the 4 that do that specific part of the brain, the 5-HTP2A serotonin receptor, LSD, psilocybin mushrooms, mescaline, which is the main chemical in peyote, and then ayahuasca and DMT, which are sort of the same and sort of different. DMT is in ayahuasca. Ayahuasca is an Amazonian brew that includes other things too and lasts longer, whereas DMT is a much like 5-minute journey. So those are considered the classic psychedelics. There are also things like ketamine, MDMA, salvia, ibogaine. There's a lot of other psychedelic substances that are also being researched and also potentially therapeutic. But these 4/5, because ayahuasca and DMT are kind of different. So these 4 or 5 substances are the kind of classic ones. And so because a dissertation is supposed to be so very specific, my dissertation committee encouraged me to kind of narrow it down as much as I could. But I didn't want to like just do, you know, psilocybin or just do LSD or something. So I expanded it to all of these. And so in my interviews, people talked about other experiences they had, whether it was MDMA, ketamine, cannabis, different things. But the ones that I specifically focused on were these.
Mm-hmm. So for the plant medicines, like peyote or the psilocybe mushrooms or ayahuasca, can you talk about like the cultural context that those medicines, as opposed to the synthetic medicines, and kind of what your research found about how people considered that or didn't consider that, or just how that kind of carries forward into how people consider that in their use of those medicines.
Right, yeah, so those specifically, psilocybe mushrooms, peyote, and ayahuasca have been used for thousands of years. And so there's a lot of history with that, and a lot of indigenous wisdom that we can learn from. And whereas LSD or DMT is actually in all of our brains right now. It's something that is part of the human body in small amounts, but having DMT as a separate experience is, relatively new, and LSD as well, both in the 20th century. But, so yeah, there's, I think with the ones that are found in nature have a lot of that tradition and indigenous wisdom with them that can be really valuable for an experience. wasn't necessarily differences between if someone had a psilocybin pill or psilocybin mushrooms. Like it's can be very similar. It is really the same experience, but there's also because set and setting are your mindset and your environment, and so if you're in a context that's in nature and there's much more of a it can kind of affect the vibe, I guess I might say, to have plants rather than synthetic.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So for your research, I'm wondering what were some of the things that you found that surprised you in your research? Like you went in and you had some assumptions about what you were going to find. What were some things that surprised you about your research?
Yeah. Well, I would say that one of the things that I really was interested in studying was how the peyote ceremony affected me in a lot of ways of like my spiritual practices and commitment and my interest and curiosity in like other religious traditions too. So I called these religious spiritual commitment and religious spiritual tolerance, and how a lot of secular research shows that the more you have of one, the less you have of the other. But what it seems is that with psychedelic experiences, they both increase. And so that was a cool feature that I think, at least from the qualitative evidence, the interviews, came across, which is a really cool thing.
Mm-hmm. So kind of the flip side of that, so what was something that you thought you were going to find, but you didn't in your research?
Yeah, thought that I would find but didn't. I think there probably in relation to that commitment and tolerance piece, I guess a lot of the people, I kind of anticipated that there were maybe less that became part of a religious spiritual community afterwards than I had anticipated, but there was a lot of like individual practices that were strengthened, and so a lot of people were like, for example, there was several participants, but I'll highlight one in particular. I call him Charles in the study. They're all pseudonyms, but Charles was kind of born and raised a more fundamentalist, conservative, evangelical Christian, and then was atheist for a while, and then kind of left the church and religion in general, and then had his psychedelic experiences, and now he identifies as more spiritual but not religious, or maybe a progressive Christian now, or something like that. So those were, well, maybe not something maybe not something I didn't expect to find, but something that was really kind of unique about the study, to see a lot of those stories.
Yeah. So I think, so you had, I've read some of your dissertation, and there are a lot of really great stories in there of people's experiences. And, as we've talked over the last couple of months, you've shared some of those stories. So I'm wondering what some of the ones that really kind of stand out in your mind of what people have taken from their psychedelic experiences, and then that they've kind of brought forward into their regular states of consciousness, that have really been important to them.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so there's a couple stories I'm thinking of that would be really cool to share. There was one with this participant who he was going through a rough time just following a divorce, and his wife had cheated on him, and he was very heartbroken by that. And he was on an ayahuasca journey, and he was kind of went through this experience where he felt like he was like blasted off into space and then was in this dark void, and he saw these faces of people coming before him, and he saw his parents, and considering like the things that he needed to let go of and forgive. And so he said, I forgive you, and then these faces kept flashing before him, and he was like releasing the weight, and then more and more people from his life kept flashing before him, and he kept releasing and letting go. And he said that, and it felt so great. And then more people forgiving, and it was just so healing. And then bam, my ex-wife right in front of me. And that's where the real healing began. And he described his experience of, which is kind of a cool feature of the psychedelic journey too. He was totally in that, but also aware that he was sitting on a mat holding the hand of his guide as he's crying. So he was like simultaneously aware of like both dimensions of the experience. And he just started to unload and just cry and really get some of that catharsis that he really needed. And then after minutes, long time of crying, he said, I can finally breathe. And it was this deeply healing experience for him. So that was one that was really powerful. A second one, which was about, and there's sort of a quote about Ashley earlier, but it was her experience of healing. Was she had some childhood trauma, and she had made this agreement in her ayahuasca journeys about whatever the lessons are, I will go through them. And then she described having had these panic attacks in the middle of the night for her whole adult life. And she wanted to heal from that. And during her journey, it's like the ayahuasca entity kind of invited her into whatever might be most healing for her. And she witnessed herself as a 4-year-old girl being abused by her mother. And she said, well, I know that's where this trauma started. I don't want to relive that. And the ayahuasca told her, this isn't easy, but this is the way, and going through. And so she relived that, but from a sort of, from the perspective of both her and her mother, and it really also helped with this forgiveness of her mother for the abuse. And so that was a really powerful part of the journey. And then she shared that afterwards, she has not had a panic attack since. And that was such a profound evidence of how healing this can be, that it was, mental, emotional, spiritual healing, a really deep way. And there's a third story, is for the beings and spirit guides. I remember this one participant sharing with me that she had a lot of, and she had journeyed a lot at this point, and she was talking about a DMT experience where she was describing being in the sea, like it was kind of like a Finding Nemo adventure type thing. And she said, at that point in my life, all my spirit guides had always been feminine, and I had kind of a lot of like toxic masculinity in my life, and like just not a good impression of the masculine. And then there was this beautiful bedazzled fish that came and was like, so I'm your masculine guide, here I am. And it was this beautiful like display of you know, positive masculinity that helped heal a lot of the toxic like remnant from her past experiences. And so that was a really cool thing, that the medicine gives you what you need in a lot of ways. When she was ready for that, that helped heal a lot of those experiences. So yeah, there's so many other ones too thinking about, but those are a couple of the highlights.
Yeah, thanks for those. I'm wondering if there's anything else from here. These are just some of the highlights from Brian's dissertation, some of the you know, some of the major themes that just kind of pulled out. I don't know if there's anything else before we move on, because we're going to have some time in small groups for folks to have some discussion too.
Yeah. Well, I think of environment. I remember one participant sharing, just several of them really, just feeling so in tune with nature and so united with the trees being this symphony in the wind. And so environment plays a really crucial role. And yeah, the spirit guides I mentioned, and a lot of the, let's see, with inner journeys, I'll share one more. There's one participant whose his pseudonym was Colin, and he talked about a mushroom experience he had decades earlier, and how he was in nature, he's sitting on this rock, and he just had this feeling of all is well. Everything is perfect, all is well. And he knows, looking back on that experience, that deep peace and contentment he had has been an anchor for him throughout his life. And so having that peace, abundance, blessedness, having that, it was a real anchor for him whenever he started to feel anxious, and you know, just remembering that he'd been there to that place, that mental state of peace and contentment and abundance, and having that experience has been a resource for him throughout his whole life.
Thanks, Brian. All right. I didn't have a specific question to this, but I want to make sure that we don't miss something in terms of the outcomes from the outcomes that you saw in your research, and any particular stories that you wanted to share about people's about outcomes that people experienced as a result of their psychedelic experiences.
Yeah. Yeah, I'll share another about grief too. It's not on, but this was a really powerful experience too, that one young man had, of his encountering his deceased grandparents on an ayahuasca journey, where he talked about being like going through the light years of space and then coming to a place where it was sort of like a dark room, and then having his grandparents there and talking to them and hugging them and sharing that he loved them. And he shared with me that he wasn't able to be there when they died, and this was such a powerful experience of closure for him. And so there's, and he goes to sort of wonder if this was like an actual encounter with his deceased relatives, or if it was a vision to help him with healing. And he kind of leaned toward really feeling like it was actually an encounter with them, that these somehow connected him to the afterlife. So he admitted there's no way to prove that, but it was, really like opening the veil. So that was a very healing experience for him. And then there's so many that expressed just a deeper gratitude and connectedness. So that was major themes right there, all of those.
Thanks. So we were going to take some time now for everyone to break into small groups, to have some discussion just over a few simple questions. Perry, I'm looking at you for guidance on how we're going to break up into groups. And actually, I'm not even sure who the facilitators are. Who agreed to facilitate? Okay.
So we're going to break into 3 groups. And so I think I'll just count people off, give you a number, 1, 2, or 3. And I think one group can go to the library. Another group can go to, let's see, number 9, in Nash. We'll help you get to these rooms if you don't know where they are. And the third group can just be in the community room.
And for how long? Because we're at 10 after 7 now.
We can do a half hour.
Half hour? Okay. And then we're going to come back here and have just a little bit of discussion and some questions.
Question and answer.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so your microphone's working, so let the online people know that have the Zoom link for them if they want to join by Zoom.
Okay. So online folks, there will be a group for you. A Zoom link will be available shortly, so you can join an online discussion shortly. Right.
1, 2, 3.
And online people, you don't have to count off.
2. We've got 1, 3.
Okay, 3. 1.
2. 3. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3.
All right. And so and what?
You're 3.
I'm a 3. And so online folks, we will reconvene here on YouTube in about a half hour. Right? Okay. Perry? Hey Perry, where are the groups going? It's green. It's green. All right. It's green. Okay. Okay. I hope everybody had a good discussion. Our group was really good. It was a great discussion. We had it was good. We're not going to report back. It's like not the point of this at all. It was just to talk. So we're going to just have just a little bit more talk, just have Brian talk a little bit more about the exclamation point, just a few things, and then have a few questions, and then wrap it up. So yeah, just a few little topics. So I'm just going to pass to you, Brian, to just give it a shot in just a few minutes.
Right.
Just a few minutes. Yeah.
So, yeah, and one of the things I should have mentioned at the beginning, when I did the categorizing of the interviews, there were 8 major themes that came up. And so preparation and integration, that was a theme that a lot of folks talked about. Environmental content was like your environment, the surroundings, nature, music, human interactions. There was outer content, which was the visions of, spirit beings or spirit guides and visions of the universe, or however that might be. Inner experiences, so inner content, and that's like the emotional gratitude, abundance, or fear, or death, or whatever's going on the inside. And then there was healing experiences, and that was another major theme. And then there was religious spiritual changes, so the healing and the changes were like afterwards. The 7th was use in the world, so how psychedelics might be used in the world, and that was something that a lot of folks talked about too. And then the last one was cautions and concerns, and that was the 8th major category. And so for cautions and concerns, there were those 3 subcategories of there was big pharma, there was the cultural appropriation, and there was the legality issues. And so everybody had something to say about those, or the majority of the people had something to say about those. And so we wanted to close this evening with talking a bit about just the legality, the legal situation. So there are certain states now where psilocybin is decriminalized, so Oregon and Colorado. And I think that's it, but there was a Massachusetts ballot measure that didn't pass, right? Was that, I think yeah. Or did it pass or did it not? Yeah. I know we're working on one in Connecticut too, so I actually spoke in January at this like advocacy of that bill to decriminalize psilocybin in Connecticut. But I think that's maybe a couple years out, or maybe next year, who knows? And so, but yeah, the FDA approval for these medicines would be in a therapeutic context. Decriminalization would protect people to use in a personal context. So, yeah, the legal issues are something to be aware of if you're ever going to have these kind of experiences. The pharmaceutical industry, so the cautions and concerns, why this came up as an issue for the 17 clinicians that I interviewed, is that all these people were mental health clinicians, so whether they're counselors, social workers, psychiatrists, psychologists, and they all expressed some concern about the pharmaceutical industry's interest in psychedelics now, that there's this promising new, but not new, medicine. And so how to best navigate that. Because there's a lot of researchers who have really good intentions and aren't looking to make millions with psychedelics, but then there's pharmaceutical industry that wants to capitalize on any kind of positive medicine. And so there was, I think, like one person I interviewed said, Big Pharma's interest has some, like a negative side and a positive side, because there could be more resources and more publicity on the positive side, but there could also be, impure motivation, you might say, on the other. So, and then cultural appropriation is something that Western medicine is just recently, developing an interest in these medicines that have been used for thousands of years in indigenous cultures. So having cultural humility, having, not appropriating but still honoring, that's also an important thing to navigate with all this.
Yeah.
Mm.
Yep. Thanks, Brian. All right, it's a lot. I want to open it up to questions for folks. And as I do, I also want to mention that there's a clipboard at the back. If people are interested in having more conversations about this, there's a clipboard. You can put your name, email, phone number, and I'm happy to subsequent to tonight, have a group convene for additional conversations. So if and we won't cover everything here. Yeah.
So I was going to say, I'm going to put this map on the screen related to what Brian was talking
very
about.
cool.
So this maps out where, obviously completely legal, but where these round circles are places where they've made it the lowest police priority. So basically decriminalized in these specific cities. And then there's working group studies in these light blue places. So this is Portland, Maine, Somerville, Cambridge, Northampton, and Salem have made it the lowest law enforcement priority.
Absolutely shocking. What's the other city west of, what's that?
Let's see what the,
Oh, is that Massachusetts?
no, let's see.
Yes.
Amherst and East Hampton. And a cluster of places over here in Michigan.
But if the state is purple, is lavender, does that active legislation mean it's legalized in those states?
No, it means I think it means there's legislation that would be voted on or is being considered. It's in the legislature right now.
Clear as mud. Thanks for that, Perry.
Yeah, that's an awesome chart.
Yeah. All right. Questions? I think it is.
So this is zona super, this work?
I might have turned it off.
You could say it and I can repeat it if you want to do that.
So this is not super spiritual, but really concrete. So step one, somebody thinks, I might want to have this experience. Could you say steps 2, 3, 4, like what did they do? What did they experience? Just a little bit fly on the wall in 2 sentences or less, because I know people have much more probably. more
Yeah,
interesting
yeah.
questions to ask, but I'm curious about.
Yeah. So yeah, if you're interested in this, I mean, there's a lot of different avenues to take. There is applying for studies like at Harvard or Yale or Johns Hopkins or NYU. Those are hard to get into because there's a lot of people applying, and you have to meet. You can't be left-handed, apparently. You know, there's a lot of criteria, but that is one avenue. There are legal retreats in Colorado and Oregon, and there are legal retreats down in you know, South America, Jamaica, places like that, the Netherlands. So there are underground therapists too who do this, and it is sacred work as well. So that's, you know, something that, if you're interested in any of those, you know, talk to me or Sally, and we can try and, you know, help you with having that, you know, kind of experience. There are like the Native American church and ayahuasca churches in this country as well, even in the region.
There's one in Maine.
And one in Maine, yeah.
There's quite a few Native American church around.
Right. In Massachusetts,
Even in Connecticut.
Maine, right.
But some of excuse me, but
Yeah, please.
some of the roadmen, that the people who facilitate the meetings, sometimes some of them don't like non-natives.
Oh, right, that's true,
So
yes.
I think,
So, but some of them are very sharing, you know, and want.
Right.
But,
Then again, Mike, say that again, you using assisted learning, listening.
Yeah.
it's on.
I can repeat what.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, but like sometimes they don't want non-natives to participate.
Right. Some of those, yeah, they.
And I've even been to some meetings where they don't allow women to sing.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
And
Right.
and the women, like, hey, they sing anyways. You know,
Yeah.
like
Right.
some of my
right.
sisters, they just sing anyway.
Yes.
But I just that's what I was curious about, the meeting that you went to. You know, I love the songs, I love the water drum, and that's all part of it too. You know, That's part of that prayer.
Right.
I
Absolutely.
really love that way.
Thank you.
I'm glad you came.
Yeah, me too. Thank you.
I just wanted to say, if anybody thought about collecting their own mushrooms to find something that works that you can do at home, I was really into collecting mushrooms at one point and joined a group of people that were very expert at doing it. They could identify so many things, but I found it very interesting that none of them ever ate any mushrooms. So, you know, if you misidentify one, it can not work out too well.
Any other questions?
I am in the mental health field. I'm just wondering what populations this would not be a good fit for.
Oh yes, good question. So in the research so far, they have excluded people with either a history of schizophrenia or genetic disposition to that, like if you have a family member, because there's some sense that, hey, maybe it could be helpful for that population, but there's also a sense that, well, it could aggravate that. And so that's something to be, aware of. There's certain psychedelics that might not be the best if you have certain trauma, but then some that are super helpful for trauma. And so it's like the different, like MDMA is really great for PTSD and trauma, but maybe LSD wouldn't be. You know, there's just different, but maybe it would be too. I mean, there's, you know, the jury's still out on that, I guess, but the researchers try to be really cautious about not, you know, about doing no harm, you know, really trying to make sure that people who are predispositioned to certain mental illness that it won't aggravate that. So that's, yeah, good question.
All right,
Question.
we're at 8 o'clock. How about one more, and we'll wrap then. Okay. Moira?
Just to follow up on Jonathan's question, in the indigenous population, how old would you have to be to start using a peyote? I mean, this is also, you know, clearly we wouldn't want young children to do this, but I'm curious about the indigenous population as well.
Yeah. Well, so I have been to like ayahuasca churches where they're even have the tea is given to children, but like just very little bit, you know. And do you want to speak to that? Yeah, please do.
I was talking to my sis over there, and she was telling me she was a midwife. I know women who have used it in childbirth, and I've known kids to eat medicine, and I've known kids to drink tea. Just a little bit, not a lot, you know. It's in your brain, you know. It's not going to hurt you.
Perry? Oh, wait, hold on, just one more. One more, hold on, Perry.
Yeah, it's questions from online, so we can do that
Okay,
after.
all right.
I had a question for you or anyone who's kind of experienced some of like these sort of retreats. I think I've been exposed to and know other people who have been in sort of these like spiritual communities, and I know in talking about like finding a good guide and finding someone who you trust, and it's a very vulnerable position to be in if someone's in an altered state and potentially away from their home and potentially doing something that has like legal implications or stigma from back home. It's not working. Oh, it's working now. There can also be a lot of bad actors in this field who I have friends who have been having experience with before, and just in other sort of spiritual realms, even things like yoga. I've met people who potentially are not really there to guide people, but there to kind of manipulate people. A lot of these things can be very expensive and again, very like isolating and taking people out of their sort of culturally accepted like legal norms. So I wondered if there was any thoughts about that or like sort of advice for people in, because a lot of people can even be very popular and have very compelling marketing and things like that and seem like a very trusted source in this space. But once people are out there and like vulnerable, sometimes I think that that can be very dangerous because there's not really any like checks and balances or governing body for those types of experiences.
Right, right. Yeah, and that's a really good point and a really good question, and I think it's super important to be aware of all the dangers that could happen if there's someone who claims to be a medicine healer but is manipulative or can be trying to exploit people or take advantage of someone sexually during a retreat or something like that. I mean, there's a lot of stories about that happening so there can be a lot of Yeah, that's a good point, and really something to be aware of with this, to go somewhere where you trust somebody and know I think it's good to have like a reference if someone that has been through that experience with that guide who can really vouch for them. I think that's very important. There are the beginnings of accountability groups at least in this country now. There's sort of like psychedelic therapist training programs and like organizations that try to instill like proper ethics and boundaries. So we're still at the very beginnings of that. And there's, been some bad actors so far, but hopefully that can be much more settled and going in the future. But yeah, that is a really good point. And yeah, to be with someone that you trust, and probably not to necessarily go off alone, maybe go with someone to be with you while you're on your journey and things like that. So yeah, that's another important caution and concern. Absolutely. Thank you.
Well, I'd say also, trust is more than just a gut feeling, and trust is a relationship. And Brian was talking about your mindset and the setting. So your mindset going into something like this is something that you have to set up well before you get there. So in order to do that, you need to have a relationship with somebody before you get there. It's not just showing up at a place. It's not just one day. It's before you actually get there. So you know somebody before you get there, and then you do the thing, and then you know the person after you leave there too. So it's a relationship. It's not just a one-time deal. So that trust is built on something. It's not just, okay, this person is available and willing. It's built on a relationship that is an understanding of what they've done, either from references from other people who have done what you want to do, or from understanding of what their protocols are, so you know what you're getting yourself into, and from your personal relationship with that person well before you actually commit to doing a thing. So, Perry, did you have some from the online?
Yeah, from the Zoom breakout, there were two questions.
Yes.
Can sort of combine them, but
Yeah.
somebody's wondering with how this would compare to doing hypnosis, which there's a lot of talk about hypnosis for some mental health conditions and other things that this could also address. Like, do you know anything about, how those differ? And then the second part was microdosing. How does microdosing work versus an experience like you've been talking about, people going away to have a specific experience, which I'm assuming is not microdosing. But there was a question about microdosing and how that works.
Great, yeah. So as far as hypnotherapy goes, I don't know that much about it, but I know it's powerful and can really help people. So that's, unfortunately, I haven't thought about that too much, the similarities and comparisons. But hypnotherapy does, I think, really get to the subconscious, and psychedelics can do that too. The way I describe psychedelics for people is sometimes it can take your subconscious and put it right in front of you and help you go through it to process that material. And at least from my limited understanding of hypnotherapy, it helps do that too. And in terms of microdosing, that can be really helpful. So macrodosing, we might call it, is the full-blown journeys, and that's what primarily the interviews contained. Some people talked a little bit about microdosing. A lot of people who microdose will microdose after their journey to kind of keep it fresh, keep integrating the experiences afterwards. And that can be really helpful. Other people I've heard have microdosed without ever having a full-blown experience, and they find it helps with creativity and, you know, energy and that kind of thing. So that can be potentially helpful too. But I think microdosing in terms of the therapeutic effect of psychedelics is a key to reconnecting you to your very healing experience as you go in the months and years in the future.
So microdosing psilocybin is something that I do occasionally, and it's like a relationship with the medicine that I've developed with support and help to understand and cultivate that myself so that I understand what I need and what that relationship is. It's not someone's telling me, you take this much on this day. It's me understanding what I need when I need it. And sometimes it's something that I can perceive, and sometimes it's not. Most often it's not. And it's not every day. It's not every month even. But it's more a relationship, and it is more a sacrament, and it is definitely not a supplement. So that's my view of it. So anyway, so we're at 8:15, and I want to thank you, Brian, for coming down from Avon on a rainy Friday night.
Yeah,
thank you.
Thank you. It's great to be here. There were two questions I want to answer quickly. They asked me over there, and I want to just quickly address them. Someone had asked about the interview participants, and they were all clinicians who they didn't all have a psychedelic therapy experience themselves. Some of these were either recreational experiences, or they were in a ritual context, like in an ayahuasca church, or off on their own, or in an underground therapy session. But they were all trained in psychedelic-assisted therapy. So that's how I found them, from the psychedelic-assisted therapy training program. So that's where that comes in, and they have a familiarity with the training. And another question was what I am hoping to do going forward. And so I am a full-time pastor up in Avon, but I'm also working with trying to do some psychedelic research and like writing articles. I'm trying to publish an article about my dissertation, so that'll hopefully be within the next couple months coming out. And looking to, I'd like to write a book maybe one of these days, and like thinking about things like that. I have my PhD's in counseling. I still need to get I think it's like 3,000 hours of, to get my LPC. So my degree allows me to be a counselor, but I need to be like under somebody else's license for a certain amount of hours. So I might start to work on that, but when psychedelic therapy becomes FDA approved, then I really hope to be able to get involved in more psychedelic-assisted therapy. I have done the CIIS psychedelic-assisted therapy training program, so that's something that I foresee in my future when this is all legal. So.
Right. Okay. Thanks.
So thank you.
All right.
And, yeah,
Thanks.
really appreciate you all coming out.
And sign up if you want to keep talking about this. Clipboard in the back.